Okay, today's webinar is on custom reporting. We are going to go through how to create custom reports, some of the options that are a little bit newer that you might not be familiar with. Hopefully this is helpful. If there are any questions, certainly let us know and we will be happy to answer those for you. Now for custom reports, there's two ways to get into custom reporting. Of course, you do have to have permissions for that, and there are several custom report permissions. Honestly, if you just start typing custom reporting in the security area, you'll see a whole list of them. You would have to have all of those permissions. So if that's something that you don't have, you'd want to talk to your administrator about it. Or if you have questions, get a hold of our support team. So to get into Custom Report, we can go from the File menu on the main screen of Management Plus, and go down to File and Custom Reporting and Custom Reports. Or the quick short way is on the navigation bar. There's a purple Reports button, and if you click that, it's going to take you out to Custom Reporting. All right. What we're looking at, just to kind of explain this view for a moment before we create a new report. When you have created reports, they're going to just save out here in this list. All right. Everything is alphabetized first by folder or group, and then the individual reports that are not assigned to a specific group. And we'll talk about groups throughout the webinar. So with custom reporting, what we're looking at are all of the folders, okay? Within each folder, you can have as many reports as you want. So if you want to kind of split it up between the office, front desk, billing, administrative reports, things like that, then it's a good way to keep things organized and filtered, okay? Any reports that are not assigned to a group are just going to be down here at the bottom, and you'll notice the icons are different. So that's what those mean. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new report, and the first thing, really the hardest part of custom reporting is figuring out where do I start, okay? The question you need to ask yourself is, what kind of information do I want on this report? And the reason I say that is in order to create a report, we have to select the source. So we're going to click on our little Create New button. It's a little white piece of paper, and it's going to give us a list of our sources, okay? The first 5, billing, optical, maintenance, patient, and scheduling. See, there are multiple options, so all of the sources are off to that right side menu, okay? If you're looking for appointment-related reports, then you would want to, initially think we want to go to scheduling to pull that information. Under billing, you can see there's adjustments and charge claims, so I want to see specific charges and claim information. Payments, who's deleted payments or charges, prepayments. You have a couple of options with each of these categories. Down at the bottom, we have electronic record and electronic health record information, physician information, so if you're trying to get a list of your referring doctors and their phone numbers, find out whose NPI you might not have, okay, flow monitor if you're using that, tasks, and credit cards. So going back to what I said, the first question to ask yourself is, what kind of report do I want? So today we are going to run a billing-related report. We're going to get a list of all of the charges that have been posted and who entered the charges, and we'll look at some patient information. So we are going to start in billing and charge claim information. Okay, let me shrink this down a little bit so it's not distracting in the background for you. Okay, so we are going to start creating a brand new report. The first thing I would get in the habit of doing, this is what I recommend to all of our clients that I talk to about reports, change the report title first before you even start creating the report. The reason I say that is by default the system is going to assign the name of this report to be whatever the source was. So if we forgot to save this, or if we saved it but forgot to change the name, it's going to just be called charge information. Now if I do that 2 or 3 or 4 times, I'm going to have that many reports all called charge information, and it's going to be harder to figure out what's what and just create more work for you to go back and figure it out. So first, step 1 is going to be to name your report. So we are going to call this one charges by physician by staff entry, okay? And I can always come back and change that. If I don't like the name of that title, I can come fix it later. But at least if something happens and I forget to, you know, if I do close out of this and save it, then that title is at least there. So up at the top, just kind of basic things, the orientation, do I want this portrait or landscape? Typically, you're just going to leave it at portrait unless you find after you run your report that it's too wide and your columns are wrapping to below the first line, then we might want to change it. But initially, that's not an issue. You can leave it as portrait, okay? We're going to skip the groups. We'll come back to that. So under the Generate To, the first option and the default option is always to be a columnar report, okay? That just means I want to print a report. I want it left to right. I want my columns that I choose, and just print it out for me. If I wanted to export this to a comma delimited file so I can open it in Excel or another program, I do have that choice. We can export to visual reporting, to word merges. We can process claims from here, and we could even do refund checks for patient credit balances, okay, if that's something that you do in Management Plus. Certainly not a requirement, just an option, all right? So with the Generate To, we're just going to leave that as a columnar report so we can see our data, okay? So what we're going to do now is go in and pick our columns. With columns, this is me telling the system, this is the data that I want to see, okay? So when I go into columns, it's going to give me this window. Now, on the left side of this window, there's a drop down up at the top, and this is the, think of them as column headers, okay? These are the categories or headers of what you can choose from. So if I'm looking for, you know, anesthesia-related or specific charge-related information, guarantor, you know, patient insurance information, I'm going to choose accordingly. So we're going to go ahead and just start with charge claim because that's the type of report that we're creating, is we want to see all of our charges by doctor and who entered them. So down below, now that I have my category selected, down below is an alphabetized list of my choices. These are all of the different options I have, okay? When you highlight something, so charge amount, down at the bottom it does display a short description of what that does. So this is going to display the total amount of the charge, okay? So it's pretty straightforward as far as what the columns are. Some of them are more descriptive than others, but as always, if you did have questions, you can call us, and we would be happy to answer those for you. All right, so how do we get the columns that we want from the left side over to the right side, which is where my choices or my selections will be displayed? There's two ways to do it. You can highlight, we're going to do charge amounts because I want to see how much I've charged out. You can use the single arrows in the middle of the screen that will move it from the left to the right and back, okay? You can also double click on a column that you want and it will move it over. So we want the CPT code. So by double clicking, it moved it over to my report column, all right? Now, there are two other arrows that are in the middle, and I want to show you what they do so you know not to click on them. And if you do, it's okay, you can undo it. But the double arrows move everything from the left over to the right, and I, don't want all of that on my report. So we can just move it back with the back double arrows, and everything's back the way it should be. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to choose a few columns here. We want the charge amounts. I want the CPT code. You can see we've got diagnosis codes. Maybe I want date of service. I want to see my physician. So here's my physician, and it tells you at the bottom, it displays the physician on the charge, and this is the format that name will appear in. Okay, so I want physician. Now, I also want to know who these charges are for. So I want to go over to my patient because these are my patient-related fields. I want the account number, and I want the patient's full name. Okay. Now, this is not the order that I want these in. Actually, let's add one more. We're going to go back to charge claim. So see, if you do forget to add one, you can always go back. I want to know who entered this. Okay. So now we have the columns of data that we want to see, except I don't want them in this order. When you are ordering your columns, you can do it after the fact, so you're not flipping back and forth quite as much on the left side. But think of it as what's listed top to bottom in this right side is how it will display left to right on your report when you're done with it. Okay? So I want the physician to be the first field or first column on my report. So we're going to go ahead and move that up. And then I think after that I want the date of service, and then I want the CPT code and the charge amount. And actually I want the patient's information before any of the billing. So we can just click move up. Every time you click move up or move down, it's going to move that field one space. So you can click it multiple times to get it where you want it. Okay? Now, down at the bottom we have our charge entry staff. I want to see who's posting these charges. Okay? Now, when you have your columns selected, if you right-click on one of them, we're just going to start with entry staff, you have a few choices in here. You can set the name of that column to the original name. You can rename that column if you don't like it, if you don't want the name to be charge entry staff and you just wanted it to say entry staff, we can click rename column and just have it say entry staff. Okay? Or you can revert it back to charge entry. It's entirely up to you. You can also change the column width. So again, by right-clicking, it tells you the original width is 1 inch. You can click change column width, and you can make that 1.25, or maybe we just want it to be 0.75. All right? If it is less than 1 inch, you have to remember to put the 0 point, otherwise it will try and pull 75 inches. Okay? And actually, if you hover over it, it does tell you that the max is 7. So you can do odd numbers. So if I wanted it to be, 0.40 or 0.38 inches wide, you can do that too. All right? So you can change each of these as you need to, just by right-clicking on the column name itself. Okay? Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add one more column called count. Okay, so I want a count of all of these charges. So what I want to do is, I'm going to add charge adjustments too. Okay, and there's a reason for it, and I'll tell you that in just a second. Okay, so we have the charge amount, we have the adjustments. Who's been adjusting things off? And then we have a count. Okay. So in the middle, we have these other buttons that we have not yet talked about. The first one is SQL. Okay, this is where we can come in and create our own column, name it whatever we want to name it, and then write a SQL script down in this bottom portion, and it will put whatever results from that SQL script, it will show that in the column. So most of the time this is not going to be used. I've seen it used a few times. You do have to know how to write or pull SQL script out of the database to know what to put in there. So just to give you an example, if you're not sure what SQL looks like, and this is not actually going to be a functioning SQL script because I don't write SQL scripts, but I know what they look like. So basically, we're telling the database to select X where the patient ID equals 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so whatever we type here, we're telling the database to go select something from the tables that are stored deep within Management Plus, and that's what it would be. All right. So we're not actually going to keep it on this report. I just wanted to give you an idea of what it looks like and how that can be used. Okay. Now, the next one that says XYZ, this is a text column. So if you wanted to add essentially a blank line that's 4 inches wide, that is going to add a column, its own column, essentially creating a blank line for you to be able to type and write in your own notes if you needed to do that. Okay, so it is going to display exactly what you type. It's going to be however wide you set it to be, and it's just going to be an empty column that you can use for any purpose you need, essentially. Okay, so I'll leave that one just so you can see what it looks like. Okay, now this column, or I'm sorry, this button that says FX, the third one. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it and just not ever used it, but this is a calculated column, all right? So basically what we can do is we're going to create our own data in this column by a calculation. So we are going to, we're just going to call this one, charge minus adjust, okay? That's going to be the name of our title or our column. Now, down in the bottom section where it says calculation, if you right-click in this window, any count or financial related, it has to be a dollar amount, are typically what you're going to see in these calculated columns. Anything that the system can count and keep track of. So we have charge amount, charge adjustment, and count. Okay, so I want my charge amount, I'm just going to choose my charge amount, minus my adjustments to show up in this column that I've just created called charge minus adjustment. So essentially what that's going to do is it's going to take the charges, subtract the adjustments, and give us that balance in this column that we are creating. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and save that, and I'm going to move it up just a little bit so that we have all of them together. Okay, so that's what the FX, it is a calculated column where you tell it what you want. All right. As far as picking your columns, that's really it. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. We have the data that we want. Now the next thing is to sort that data. How do we want that data sorted? Okay, when you go into sort, we don't have the choice of all of the columns anymore. We can only sort what's on this report. So, and you can see not all of our columns, the count column, there are a few that are not sortable. Okay, they'll still display on your report, but you cannot sort by that particular field. So if it's not in your list here, then you cannot sort by it. Most of them you're good to go. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to sort this by physician. And every time you do a sort, again using the single arrows or double clicking, it's going to ask you, do you want this ascending or descending? So A to Z or Z to A, all right? To me, it doesn't really matter. We're going to go ahead and just put ascending there. Then I want it sorted by, let's do staff member, okay? And I want, so each physician, under each physician, it will then sort it by staff member who entered charges, okay? If I wanted to keep going, I could. It is not a requirement. I don't have to sort by anything, but it does make the report easier for you to read when you can look just down a list by date or alphabetized or whatever. All right? So same thing on this screen. You can move these up or down if you wanted to reorder them. Okay? Now, the next option is a subtotal. Okay? When you subtotal, you can only subtotal what you're sorting by. So we're going to subtotal by physician. I don't need to subtotal by staff member. I'm not worried about that. I just want to subtotal so I can get a total dollar amount of charges for each doctor. All right? So far I assume everything's good. We don't have any questions. I am going to jump back up here to this little distinct box. Okay? With the distinct box, what that does is it acts as a It's almost like a unique filter, okay? It is looking at each one of these items, each of these columns, and it's looking for any duplicates. And it will then filter out and eliminate those duplicate records from this report. Now, this is not entirely appropriate for this particular report, but I do want you to keep in mind it essentially is the same thing as opening up Excel and clicking on a filter to filter out those unique records and only show distinct records that are in that, whatever report you're running. So essentially, if the patient's name and account number and date of service and CPT code and charge amount and the adjustments were the same for multiple line items, it would only display that once, okay? Like I said, this is not really a report we would use that on, so I'll take it out, but that's what that is, okay? The print summarization only, we're going to skip, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. So the next piece that we have to put in is our filters. Now, we don't have to put in a filter. We can just generate this report, and it's going to give me every charge for every physician that has ever been entered in our Management Plus. And that's not what I want. I only want to look for the month of July, okay? So when I go into my filters, again, we have the two sides, my available choices by header, and then I have the actual items themselves down here. So we're going to filter this by charge date of service begin or by entry date, whichever one we wanted. I'm just going to go ahead and use date of service, and we're going to double click on that to move it over. And with every date filter, this is what the screen looks like, okay? Up at the top, you have 5 choices. Date range, today, week, month, or year, where you can actually pick the year, the month, or the week. If the date is empty and the date is not empty, which these two, just so you know, are more commonly used when you're trying to find all of your patients in your system who do not have a recall and who do not have a next appointment. Okay, in that case we would use, I want to see all of the patients where their recall date is empty and their next appointment date is empty, meaning they don't have one set up. So I can reach out and try and get them back in the office. Okay, so again, occasionally you'll use those, but not on a regular basis. So we're going to go ahead and leave it at date range, because down under date range I can put in actual days, so I can just put in the month of July and run it, and that will be fine. However, when I do that, it's going to save that date in my report. So every time I want to run this report, August, September, I will have to come back in and edit my date and change my dates before I can run it again. So the best choice really is at report time. That is going to give you a box that pops up and says, what dates do you want to run it for when you're ready to run it. You don't have to actually go edit the report, okay? Just so you know, the one that says by days, this would be like if I wanted to see everything over 60 days old, or the date of service is older than 60 days, I can set it up 60 to forever, and it will show me everything older than 60 days. If I do 60 to 90, it'll show me everything that is 60 to 90 days old. So that's what the by days, that's how it works, okay? So we're going to leave this at report time and click OK. If I wanted to continue adding more filters, I can. I can go in and say, oh, where the staff entry is this person, or, you know, I can scroll down and look for just a CPT code or a CPT class, certain diagnosis codes if I wanted. You know, I can really filter this out quite a bit depending on the type of report that I wanted. If I only wanted to see one physician, I can use a physician as my filter, okay? But for this, we're just going to leave it as date of service, and I'm going to click OK. So now we've set up a report. We've told it what we wanted, how we want it sorted, and put filters on it, all right? So to generate this, we're going to go up to this top section, and there's a lightning bolt. That is your Generate button. You can also go to Report and Generate or Control-G. All right. We're going to generate this, and we're just going to do it for July. And here's my preview. Okay, So we're going to shrink this down just a little bit. It is landscape, so we have more columns going across left to right. And you see that note column, that just gives me that blank line that I created so that I can write notes in there. All right. For the purpose of looking at this, I'm going to go ahead and take that out now just so it's a little easier for everyone to view. Run this again. There we go. All right. So we have this sorted by physician. Shows the patient's account number, their full name, their date of service, the CPT code, their charges and adjustments. Now remember, we had that column of charges minus adjustments, and we might need to change it to say plus adjustments after looking at it, just depending on what you want. It is really going through, and it's showing here's the total charges of $120. There were no adjustments, so the balance, the remaining balance is $120. All right, so you're only going to see a difference where we are adjusting. Now over on the very right side, there's a count. So it shows you the total number of charges for each physician. And then a month-end total, we have 10 charges that were posted. 8 of them are for Dr. Jones. All right, and then you can see the bottom line totals here as well. Okay, down at the bottom, it is going to keep track of when this was printed. For those of you who are not aware, in custom reporting, if we had multiple pages, then we can use the page up and page down buttons on the keyboard over by your 10 key. And that way you don't have to use your scroll bar, and you also don't have to use the arrows up at the top to go from one page to another. Page down is an amazing key for that. Okay? So on our screen, if we wanted to make any changes, we could. Maybe now I don't want to see all the patient detail. I just want the summarization. I just want bottom line totals for each doctor. So that's where this print summarization comes into play. If we run it again for the same time frame, it suppresses the detail, and it just tells me by doctor my charges, adjustments, and then the difference between the two, and then my total count. Okay? So that's, essentially how custom reporting works. There are a few other tools that you have available in custom reporting. The second tab over is format, so we can go in and we can change the font and play around with that if we wanted. Under information, this tells you the source of that report. So if you're not sure, did I do this in billing or was this in patient information, you can always click on information and it tells you. Okay. Then we have security. Okay, so with security, each custom report has its own security attached to it. It cannot be done by group. It is individual reports. All right. So with this security, the way it's set up is by default, the default staff privilege is always, it should always be the top line. It should be close to the top anyway, is set to X. Okay, right now we have the access level set to full access. And then we have a list of all of our usernames, and their access level says default. So because the default, they have default access, the default is set to full, every one of these staff members have full access to this report. If you right-click on any one of these lines, so we're going to just right-click on the default line, we can say, by default, all of these staff members have no access to this report. I'm going to go in and give Jennifer full access, and Mindy full access, and Ryan full access, and so on. Now, the only people other than myself that could access or even see this report are those people that I have granted full access to. Everyone else has the default, which I've set to no access at all. Okay, so that is something that you can do if, certain financial reports, I know that doesn't necessarily need to be system-wide knowledge or company-wide knowledge. So you can go in and create those security permissions and change them to what you want, what suits you. All right? So We go back over here to our General tab, and this is just our report. If I wanted to assign it to a folder, so maybe I want to put it in Valerie's or Tim's or Mindy's or whoever, I can come over into my report under Groups and see the list of all of my groups or folders that have been created. I can click on the search button and see them in detail, or see the whole list, and I can also hit Add. Okay. When I hit Add, I can go in, and we'll just call this an admin. Okay, and when I save this, it's automatically going to be part of that admin group. So we save it. I can close it under admin. Here's the report that we just created. Okay. All right, so I just want it to be called Charges by Physician. All right. So under the report menu, you have a save. There's a save as, which I'll explain that in a second. You can save and close. Essentially, it's just saving you a step. Okay. Now, I have this report, except I now decided that I want this report one per doctor. Okay. So I'm going to come down here to my filters, and I want this one to just be for Dr. Jones. So we're going to save this one as Dr. Jones. I have not started over. I'm simply editing an existing report, and then I want to do a save as. And this one is going to be Dr. Jones. Now when I close it, it's not going to save my changes to my original report. Here's my original, no physician. And then here's my Dr. Jones charge report that will just display Dr. Jones. Okay, so that is a huge time saver if you're creating the same report for multiple physicians, multiple locations, multiple anything. Come in here and use that save as. All right, it will save you a lot of time. You can also export forms. So any of these custom reports that I have created, I can go out, export this, save it to my desktop. It's going to be called Charges by Physician. That's great. And it's now saved on my desktop. You might not be able to see it. It's in the middle. It's essentially just a new icon on my desktop. Okay? So when we go back into our report, let me get back there, sorry. There we go. When we are in our report, you can export it by, like I said, that report menu, or you can click on the second icon, which has the red arrow, that will export that. So any Management Plus user, you guys can share custom reports. If you have a great report and you end up talking to somebody and or you get a phone call with someone asking, hey, how do you do this? You can share those custom report formats. Of course, they cannot run it on your database to get your data, but the format, just this template, is what you're sharing. And then they can go in and say, well, you know what, my doctor is not Dr. Jones, my doctor is Dr. Adams. And now they have a brand new report that will be great for them to use with their physicians. Okay? The third icon, the little tower button, is just a close. So if we click that, it just closes the report. Okay? As far as the actual report itself goes, there's not much more to setting up the custom report. Like I said at the beginning, the hardest part is knowing where to start. After that, it's not too bad. You cannot break anything in custom reporting. Worst case scenario, your report is blank and we have to start over. We need to change or modify something. Okay? Now, there is a user manual in the system. So any computer that has Management Plus loaded, there's a custom reporting section. Under custom reports, we have groups, and it talks about groups, and then it talks about creating a new report. If you go to create new, this is all of the same information we just went through, and it kind of just goes through each button and helps you along that way. So you can pull up and utilize that user manual. One other thing, a few other little things that I wanted to point out. On this screen, you can simply highlight the report you want and hit the lightning bolt, and it will generate that report at that time. Okay? The white paper is to create a new report, and if you hover over these, then you can see the labels. This is an edit button or modify, delete, and then we have favorites and a way to get in and edit the report groups. So these are all of the groups for my office, okay? If you have reports that you run on a regular basis, you can right-click or you can come up here to this little red check mark button and mark them as favorites, okay? You cannot mark an entire folder as a favorite. It is just individual reports. Now, if you right-click, you have the same choices, just another way to get to them. There's a new, create a new one, edit, delete, remove from favorites. When it's not a favorite, it just says add to favorites. There's generate, add to a group, remove from a group, and then you can import a report that someone else has sent to you, okay? When reports are marked as favorites, what you can do is get to them a little bit quicker. I mean, I know it doesn't take a terrible amount of time to click on the shortcut here, but rather than having to scroll through everyone's report, from File, Custom Reporting, there's Favorites, and these are all of the reports that the SysDBA user has marked as favorites, and here's the two admins, okay? The other thing you can do as far as creating shortcuts for yourself, up at the top you can right-click and customize, okay, or you can go to Tools and Customize. Either way, it's going to take you to this window, and then Commands, okay? If we find Custom Reporting on the left side, and I find my favorites on the right side, if you left-click and hold that favorites down, you see the little square that's with my mouse? I'm creating a shortcut to my favorite list of custom reports. I can't drag individual reports, but if they're marked as a favorite, I can jump right over here and click on the report that I want to run at that time. Okay. So as far as custom reporting goes, there's really not much more to go into. You can drag reports. So let me make this a little bit bigger. If I wanted this AR report, this should be in my admin. I can just drag that up and drop it into my admin folder. You know, I can do that with as many reports as I want to. If you have not, up to this point, utilized groups or folders, it's a great way, and it's pretty quick. You can see just dragging these up and put them in that admin folder, okay? And I didn't have to go in and edit any of them. The one that was my favorite is still marked as a favorite. All right. The other options that are in Custom Reporting menu, you can go view and print reports that you've saved. From here, this one is not, and you might not even have this on yours, it's not, we haven't saved any reports out here, so this is going to be blank. But once it was, you know, set up and we have saved those, and you can call support and we can help you with that. And the report group list is also here, and then of course favorites. Visual reports we're not going to get into, but that is a more detail that uses SQL again to get more information from the database, and we can kind of combine, you know, scheduling and billing functions as far as a report. Where custom reporting, you have to actually choose that initial source. Where do you want to start? Okay. So I don't have any questions that have come in, and if you guys do have questions, please let us know. Otherwise, I appreciate your time today. Hopefully this was helpful. And actually, really quick, one more thing I wanted to point out. At the top of this appointment screen, there is a schedule, okay? When you click that schedule button, it takes you out to this calendar, and if you double click, you can create the subject to run charges by physician report, start time, end time, and who do you want to email this to. So you can email this to a person in your office and tell them you want them to run this report on this date at this time, okay? And then that person will get an email showing, Yeah, they'll get that email showing, hey, you need to log into custom reporting. It does not run the report for you, but it does send it to someone kind of as a task so they can log in and run it. Okay, so that was the last thing. Since we don't have any questions, I do appreciate your time today, and if there are questions that come up afterwards, certainly get a hold of us and we'll be happy to answer those. Thanks so much and have a great afternoon, everyone.